Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tiesenghausen. Today is May 14th. There is a lot of important news. In this episode, Putin may still fly to Istanbul for negotiations. Peskov is keeping the intrigue going until the very end. How are Russians recruiting Ukrainians in Europe to carry out sabotage? And Macron is proposing to deploy French nuclear weapons in other countries. But is it possible to deploy them in Ukraine? We'll also talk about the strike on Russia's shadow fleet and new tough sanctions against Russia. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Let's get into it. And here we have the intrigue of the century. That is, the Kremlin has not yet revealed the composition of the Russian Federation's delegation in Istanbul, but it will definitely be waiting for the Ukrainian side on Thursday. This was stated by Peskov. What an intrigue. Honestly, I really don't know. There are so many possibilities for who might fly to Istanbul. In general, I think there are only three options. The most likely option is the gloomy horse and some random stableman with her. The most unlikely is Putin himself, or more likely some kind of his replicant. Well, there's also another way to surprise everyone, as they say, by sending Yanukovych to dance. In short, as Medvedchuk's wife used to say, and even from Karaganda, they can get you. But seriously, Trump will definitely send Marco Rubio there. That's the head of the State Department. And Trump stated the following: the negotiations will take place this week in Turkey, probably on Thursday, and they could lead to very good results. Marco will be there. Earlier, the president of Ukraine had called on Trump himself to come to the negotiations, hoping that, Putin wouldn't be brazen enough to simply blow off Trump himself. Maybe he will show up. Although a bit later, I'll give you a couple of facts explaining why he really doesn't want to fly there. And Zelensky stated that he thinks this could further push Putin to participate. He means Trump's visit. And the White House, in response, made it clear that Trump will only fly to Istanbul if he is absolutely certain that Putin will be there. That is, today Trump, by the way, said that his schedule for tomorrow is already set, but he can change it. So, in the end, Putin is acting like some kind of coquette, I don't know, just sitting there and keeping everyone in suspense. But Zelensky will come to Turkey in any case. However, if Putin doesn't show up, he will only have a meeting with Erdogan there. Zelensky has no intention of meeting with any of Putin's officials. And remember, Putin kept saying all the time that Ukraine should revoke the decree prohibiting negotiations with him, and then direct talks would begin however they want, and so on. Well, now they're telling you, come, direct negotiations. We are waiting in a neutral country where Erdogan will guarantee your security and anything else you need. And in response, as they say, silence. In other words, sending these clerks when everyone perfectly understands that they can't make any decisions on their own, is basically admitting that you're a coward. You, Putin. Although I think everyone already knows that perfectly well anyway. In short, everyone can see how Putin squirms, trying in every possible way to avoid these personal negotiations. And naturally, Zelensky is not going to talk to Lavrov. Right now, the whole world is watching as the myth of the Iron Putin, the tough KGB man, is falling apart. That is, the myth that Russian propagandists and special services have so carefully constructed over decades. Remember all of that. The talk about wiping them out in the outhouse, the shirtless photos, some judo throws, photos in a kimono, photos in a pilot's cap, in a naval uniform, in dark sunglasses. As if to say Putin is so tough, all macho. But here's how it really shows itself, how it actually manifests. So when it's time to actually demonstrate real willpower, he just sits there in his castle and doesn't go anywhere. Well, of course, because you can't bring a 10-meter long table to Istanbul where you can just sit like this and watch your opponent from afar. Instead of this mythical steely Putin, The world has seen, I think, this cowardly, shifty-eyed old man who's lied so much and is afraid to meet his opponent one-on-one. Ukraine has become the mirror in which the real Putin is reflected. Although I think ghouls, well, according to various legends, don't show up in mirrors. But Ukraine has simply revealed Putin's real face with all his vices, his weaknesses, and his cowardice. For some reason, I remembered a scene from a cult film. I'm not afraid to use that word. Starship Troopers, which was made based on the science fiction novel by Robert Heinlein. And basically, the essence of that scene, I just clearly saw Putin in it. The essence of the whole film novel is that during the battle between humans and an extraterrestrial race of giant arachnid bugs, the space marines on one of the planets capture the brain bug, I don't know what else to call it, a bug that not only sits in a burrow, in a tunnel like Putin in a bunker, but also gives orders to all the other giant bugs of various types. All those arachnids were busy capturing other planets. Exactly like that, you see? Exactly. And this giant bug in the film looks like a huge larva. They finally caught it on one of the planets, tied it up with a net, and dragged it out into the light. It looks like a giant bag of Botox with lots of little eyes. And one of the intelligence officers approaches it, touches it, and it recoils, trembling, cash several times bigger than a human. The whole substance started to shake, all jelly-like, and the officer says, it's afraid. You see? That's exactly where I saw Putin. Exactly. How strikingly similar it is, figuratively speaking. Most of you in the last or the previous episode assumed that Putin wouldn't come to Istanbul. I wonder if your opinion has changed in light of the latest news and events. By the way, write in the comments whether you think he'll come or not. Maybe there are some of you who believe he will come. It would be interesting to hear why. By the way, Russians have shown up in the comments and bot farms too. And they started, who? Let everyone come to Putin. Putin, he won't go anywhere. Yeah, and so on. Honestly, you should come up with better excuses. Somewhere over there in Olgino or wherever you get your scripts from. Prepare more thoroughly. By the way, with Lavrov, I'm almost certain that right now, you and I could absolutely, Kikina, accurately predict the exact phrase Lavrov will say when he's in Istanbul. That is, of course, he might meet with a delegation of a certain level. Maybe it will be the foreign minister Sibiga, or maybe someone else. In general, I'm sure that each of you could easily come up with this phrase. It's very simple. It is necessary to take Russia's interests into account in resolving the Ukrainian, the Ukrainian conflict. And it is also necessary to eliminate the root causes of this conflict. In other words, it's an empty phrase. By the way, Lavrov has the opportunity to eliminate the root cause of this conflict every single day. All he needs to do is, whack his bald-headed boss with something heavy. That's it. Not only would the cause of this conflict disappear, but also the causes of all future conflicts and wars. Unless, of course, a Putin 2.0 comes to take his place. And we all know that the system which created Putin and led him by the hand to power can only produce another Putin just like him. Well, who else could they send there besides Lavrov? Ushakova, Dmitrieva, who else? Medvedev? But Medvedev would fall into a coma on the plane to Turkey. So upon arrival, he'll get off the plane and right there on the steps, he'll definitely start insulting everyone, yelling basically, making a drunken scene, just like some Russians behave. He'll be shouting, "I'm in Turkey, where's my all-inclusive?" That's exactly what Medvedev would do. Can you believe it? He was actually once the president of the Russian Federation, can you imagine? And now they just bought him that Dr. Evil costume, that tunic from Children's World, and sent him off to tell young people how great Russia is and how the West is decaying. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And if you're already subscribed, hit the bell icon. It helps. Overall, it feels like our European and overseas partners are reluctant to impose these promised sanctions until the very last moment. They're still giving Putin one last chance, a second to last chance, a chance hanging by a thread, a chance on a needle, and so on. Still hoping that he might announce this 30-day ceasefire. I think they've simply forgotten who they're dealing with. I mean, we can see how stubborn he is, like a big spider. They're trying to drag him out by all his legs, arms, claws, even jellyfish-like tentacles. He's resisting with everything he's got, just digging into that wall. No, I don't want a ceasefire. I won't do it. I don't want to. I want to fight. And here they're telling him, that's it. Come on, get out. It's all over. Come out. Otherwise, there will be sanctions. But on the other hand, after Putin blows off Istanbul, after Putin once again spouts some long-winded nonsense through Lavrov or someone else, well, not imposing these sanctions will be impossible. By the way, the ambassadors of the European Union have agreed on the 17th package of sanctions against Russia, and it's quite interesting. Ursula von der Leyen on the new sanctions against Russia. In general, she's doing a great job and has a very pro-Ukrainian stance. If only there were more politicians like her. And Kaja Kallas, well, if there were more pro-Ukrainian politicians like that, it would be just wonderful. Those who absolutely don't care about any of Putin's so-called inflated authority. So, Ursula von der Leyen, I welcome the agreement on our 17th package against Russia. We are further restricting access to military equipment, and we have added another 189 Shadow Fleet tankers to the list, which will be targeted for Tanmo exporting energy resources from Russia. This war must end, and we will continue to put pressure on the Kremlin. Such a position always deserves immense gratitude, and I always try to thank everyone who supports Ukraine. In total, roughly, well, about 200 tankers will not be able to enter the ports of the European Union, and their owners will not be able to use the services of European companies for things like re-registration or reinsurance. It's not all that simple, not that simple. Overall, well, American sanctions against the tankers, of course, would be much more significant, but to use Donald Trump's language, he has kept that card up his sleeve. He'll use it a little later. Plus, about 30 Russian individuals are facing new trade restrictions, and another 75 people and companies will no longer be able to conduct business in the European Union at all. Their assets will be frozen. So what's important here? What's important in this package? The sanctions themselves are good. Hit those who help circumvent the sanctions. This package will impose restrictions on companies from third countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Serbia, Vietnam, and Uzbekistan. They are suspected of helping Russia circumvent the sanctions. This is very, very, very important. Everyone knows we live in the digital age. If an African country orders spare parts for a Boeing, and they don't even have those planes, then it's clear that they're going to send them somewhere to someone who can't buy them directly. The same goes for dual-use technologies, so dual-use goods and so on. That's what's important. There's more. Along with this package, more additional sanctions against Russia were agreed upon for human rights violations. And finally, what we've been waiting for quite some time. And by the way, I'm surprised that Europe has such boundless patience, because this issue concerns Europe itself directly. Sanctions for Russia's hybrid interference around the world. Sanctions for this hybrid interference should have been imposed a long time ago, back when warehouses in Europe first started catching fire, when packages, remember, began to ignite, when there were attacks on executives of arms companies like Rheinmetall, when there was bribery through Medvedchuk, that ubiquitous devil popping out of a snuff box, who tried, and to some extent succeeded, in bribing candidates and members of the European Parliament through his organization Eurovoice. It's a major scandal, and investigations are still ongoing. And that's not all. There's also illegal financing of political forces. We are talking about Moldova here and Romania as well. This also includes sabotage at military bases, on railways, cyber crimes, and destabilizing information campaigns. All of it. Russia generously spread all of this throughout Europe. These are actions just below the threshold of war, meaning they're not enough to declare war over, but unfortunately, the Russians could afford to do it, and this also includes damage to underwater infrastructure. So all of this is more than enough to impose sanctions. Well, and the methods of Narishkin's agency, the Foreign Intelligence Service, are well known to everyone. Remember, not long ago, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service published a press release claiming that Ukraine was preparing terrorist attacks in Europe or against Russian diplomats and against others as well. And here's the result. Here's the result, how the clumsy SVR agents and other Russian special services slipped up and got caught. Well, first of all, let's thank Narishkin for the fact that everything Russia wants to do, following Goebbels' precept, they accuse their opponents of doing. So, for example, if Russia wants to carry out a terrorist attack in Europe, they post on their website that Ukraine is going to do it. It's all clear. Get ready, Europeans. That means the Russians are planning some new nasty scheme. So, in Germany, 3 Ukrainians were detained. They are suspected of working for Russian special services and planning explosions. According to German investigators, Russian agents were arrested in Cologne and Constance, who were supposed to carry out sabotage and terrorist attacks in Germany. To do this, they planned to send those very packages containing a substance like thermite so that the packages would catch fire and explode during transportation. All of these agents, unfortunately, are citizens of Ukraine. There are those who are willing to work for Russian intelligence for money. They are currently under investigation and giving testimony. This is a case of particular importance, so I think they won't let them go until they've told everything, at least everything they know. An arrest warrant has also been issued for a suspect connected to them who resides in Switzerland. In the summer of 2024 in Leipzig, or perhaps it's more correct to say Leipzig, a package exploded. No one was injured. And a similar incident occurred in Birmingham. So these individuals were sending test packages with GPS trackers to figure out at which point along the route the package and the ignition might occur. And probably the idea was that if packages started catching fire, in different places large warehouses would begin to burn. And if these warehouses are also located near those intended for aid to Ukraine, then that's even better. In other words, they wanted to sow widespread terrorist panic. By the way, German law enforcement agencies are concerned that there could be hundreds of such Russian agents because we're talking about low-level operatives. That is, these aren't some special agents who have undergone special training in Russia. These are simply the people who have been bought for money, who have found themselves in a difficult financial situation or have become dependent in some way. So that's how it is. And they can strike at any time. And here, I should also add that I actually did an episode on this very topic. It should be added that one of the versions was that these packages were supposed to catch fire on board postal airplanes. In that case, it would be difficult to land the plane, and it would be extremely hard to extinguish this substance on board. In general, this could have had very serious consequences. By the way, friends, the war hasn't gone anywhere, and despite the ongoing talks about a ceasefire, there are currently very fierce battles with the Russian occupiers. And I think for all of us, our main wish is for our defenders to return home safe and sound to their families. But in some areas, the situation is truly difficult. I keep in touch with those for whom we organized fundraisers. That's why right now there's a major fundraiser for the Freedom of Russia Legion, for the unit of UAV operators who really, and not just assault, but also reconnaissance operators who truly help save lives and destroy all this swamp filth that has come to our land. And, well, the link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There's a link to the Legion's bank, as well as the Legion's bank card, and also PayPal for those who want and are able to help from abroad. I always want to say a huge thank you for this. And from our soldiers, as well, an enormous thank you. You are doing something truly important. And once again, nuclear weapons. Yes, if you're not watching on my channel, here's a QR code. It leads directly to the Legion's fundraising bank. And again about nuclear weapons, about Macron, who wants to deploy French nuclear weapons in other countries, which is really making not the Russian Federation and some of its spokespersons nervous. Macron has already brought up this topic before, but now he's started to address it in a more systematic way. We do not want to start a third world war, Macron stated, and proposed deploying French nuclear weapons in other countries. Well, Macron said that France wants to help Ukraine, which has been attacked by Russia, of course, but at the same time, to avoid this third world war. We must help with defense, but we do not want to start a third world war. The war must end, and Ukraine should be in the best possible position to begin negotiations. Well, Macron is generally doing a great job, making good, correct statements. You can't take that away from him, but I would like them to go a bit further. Although I must emphasize, Macron, France, and the people of France have done a lot to help Ukraine. But having said A, well, accordingly, the next letter B should follow. It should come to real actions. In this context, Macron, regarding the possible deployment of French nuclear weapons just a moment. Friends, Siegfried is trying to get in. Let's let him in. Right, Siegfried? Siegfried. He is my adorable little pug. He doesn't really like it when I record videos. It's fine so far. Here it is. Because I pay less attention to him than, well, in the context of deploying nuclear weapons in other countries. He referred to the United States, which has already stationed aircraft with nuclear weapons at bases in Belgium, Germany, Italy, and Turkey. And Macron is ready, to start this discussion, to define the framework for such negotiations in the coming weeks and months. And here, it should be understood that we are, of course, talking about the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons, not strategic ones. So I decided to take a look and update the information on who has how many. France has a total of 290 warheads, of which about 100, around 90, are specifically tactical warheads. Let me remind you, Russia, according to various estimates, has a total of 5,000 equal 800. But who, or rather no one, actually knows what condition the Russian Federation's nuclear arsenal is in. So it's hard to say. By the way, North Korea has already managed to acquire nearly 30, and by some estimates up to 50 warheads, because they keep that number secret. So Macron wants to gradually deploy these 90, though, tactical warheads on carriers, on aircraft, in different countries, because there is a possibility that the United States is not only considering withdrawing its contingent from Europe, but also taking back its tactical nuclear warheads from European bases. In other words, this is a completely realistic scenario. Besides, by the way, France also has 50 cruise missiles with nuclear warheads that can be launched from Rafale fighter jets. Well, to be honest, the US has turned out to be not a very reliable partner when it comes to protection, both in terms of the nuclear umbrella and not just the nuclear one. And now Europe, whether it wants to or not, will definitely have to act independently, defining and pursuing its own interests, regardless of the US. That is, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom have started to divide these roles among themselves. Previously, everyone relied on the US. If anything happened, they would cover them. But now France is proposing to extend its nuclear umbrella to its allies. Germany is launching a massive investment program, about 500 billion, to strengthen its infrastructure and defense. And the United Kingdom is ready to take on a leading role in this new, let's say, European military leadership. Well, France is ready as well. While Europe is still being cautious, Putin, of course, doesn't ask anyone for permission because, well, he's an absolute lawless figure. Only a scumbag could attack his neighbor after previously saying, "I would never attack in my life. There's no need. We're brotherly nations," and so on. Brotherly nations, and then suddenly he started digging through libraries, or rather his court pseudo-historians did, in an attempt to prove that Ukraine is not a real country, that it doesn't exist. And in general, I'll show you now, as they say. Remember how he put together a whole folder for Tucker Carlson's after his lecture about the Pechenegs and the Polovtsians, a whole folder tied up with ribbons, just like a nasty old geezer. So North Korea. Well, let's put it this way. Europe is being cautious. Let's finish up this story about nuclear weapons first. And at this time, Putin is handing over nuclear weapons to Lukashenko. Transmits? Transmits. We don't know whether they're real or just props that they've given to Kolya's dad, that is, to Lukashenko. But still, he's handing them over. Plus, Russian nuclear physicists and representatives from Rosatom regularly, just like they're just visiting friends, go to Iran, and Iranian scientists travel to Russia, exchange experience, and do internships, undergo training at Rosatom. And everyone pretends that this is how it's supposed to be. So, a regime of crazy ayatollahs with nuclear weapons, that's considered normal. Kim Jong-un is an absolute psychopath, completely unhinged, who just executes everyone around him and threatens his neighbors, having driven his country back to some kind of stone age. All he knows how to do is churn out weapons. Now he's even built new factories for Russia. So all of this is considered absolutely normal. In short, Kim Jong-un is developing not only a nuclear weapons program in Pyongyang, 50 warheads, but also chemical and biological weapons programs. Over the past few years, China has accelerated the pace of ballistic missile testing. It is known that they are developing ballistic missiles for submarines. Why do you think he's doing this? Just for the sake of it? No. When he finally loses it completely, when he goes totally off the rails, he'll just go ahead and launch it. Or they will find some incurable disease in him. He will already understand that. Everything will go to hell. Of course, he's absolutely unhinged. You should see what makes him the happiest. You know what it is? The military parade, when those APD Bibiros drive past him, when some missile launches go by, he just claps his hands, laughs, jumps around, and has a great time. That's what it's come to. And to make those missiles even more accurate, Kim Jong-un has started working closely with Putin in the aerospace sector. Putin is launching satellites more for him so he can strike more accurately with these new missiles. If this keeps up, in a couple of years, Kim Jong-un will have half the world living in fear. I'm telling you, that's a fact. It's honestly just amazing, isn't it? Two nuclear states are fighting against Ukraine. Actually, that's not even the whole picture. If you also consider that China is saving the Russian economy by buying energy resources and dual-use goods, and is supplying a lot of things bypassing sanctions, then it's actually 3 nuclear states at war. These 3 nuclear states have gotten to the point where Putin is afraid to fly to Turkey to meet with Zelensky. What a great nuclear club, right? But It's a failure. The fact that they all have nuclear weapons, that Kim Jong-un does, that Iran will soon get its own nuclear weapons, that's a huge, huge failure. And I have a feeling that if, in a few years, God forbid, of course, the world faces problems with some new, completely unhinged nuclear dictator, the world will have no choice but to call on Ukraine to deal with him. Well, only Ukraine has experience in taking on nuclear dictators. So let's all deal with this one together first, and then the others simply won't dare try anything. So, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, support the fundraiser if you can, and be sure to subscribe to this channel. Wishing us all a peaceful day. I'm recording this literally 10 minutes after the air raid alert ended. Glory to our Ukraine.